Thank you for attending the March 2021 Transportation U AZ event. Transportation U is a national, hands-on, interactive mentoring program that offers young girls ages 13 through 18 an introduction to a wide variety of transportation careers. It is connected to Women's Transportation Seminar, or WTS, which is a women's organization for transportation professionals. I am Michael Book, a strategic communications specialist in HDR's Phoenix office. HDR is an international company specializing in engineering, architecture, environmental, and construction services. If you have any program or event questions, you can send me an email at michael.book@hdrinc.com. My email address is being placed in the chat right now. This event is also supported by Shelby Blashford, Engagement Specialist at WTS International, and Bree Balke, Community Relations Coordinator at Valley Metro. Before we get started, I would like to briefly discuss the Transportation U program. Each month throughout the school year, there will either be an online speaker or online facility tour. There is nothing scheduled during the summer months. You can always stay connected to learn about upcoming events or recorded sessions by connecting on Facebook or Instagram using the keywords Transportation U AZ. Next month, I wanted to mention that we do have our April speaker scheduled, and it is Rebecca Eccles, who is the Utilities Conservation Program Coordinator at Boeing. And we're doing it as an Earth Day event. So April 22nd at noon Arizona time, which is on Pacific Standard Time right now. And in the chat, we will put the registration in case you're interested in registering for that event as well. And now for today's event. Becky Santiago is a transit planner for HDR with diverse experience in public transportation and sustainability planning. As a transportation planner, she is responsible for a variety of project elements, including analyzing study areas, applying for funding such as grant writing, developing operating plans, and conducting public outreach. She works locally on Valley Metro light rail and bus projects, but also helps agencies with bus rapid transit, light rail, and freight planning in California, Texas, Ohio, Iowa, Washington, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Becky is an Envision sustainability professional, which gives her a holistic perspective, allowing her to synergize opportunities to improve environmental stewardship while maintaining efficiency and financial stability. Becky, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you all for joining today's webinar. It's an honor to be here and be part of the Transportation U program. It's a great program, and happy to support it and be able to speak to you today. So just want to again say my name is Becky Santiago, and as Michael said, I'm a transportation planner with HDR. Today I really want to focus on my story about how I ended up as a transportation planner, because I know in high school it can be a little bit overwhelming, right? You're trying to start thinking about, what do I want to do with my life, and where do I want to go to college, and what do I study? And so I want to talk about my story about how I ended up here, because it's not a career path I would have expected or was planning on entering. So it kind of just fell into my lap after following some interests of mine. So I want to talk about how I ended up here, as well as cover some examples of projects that I've worked on. So to get right into it, as Michael said, I'm a transportation planner. And when I think about my story as to how I ended up here, it really has roots back into my childhood. I was a very outdoorsy kid. I have a twin brother, and we loved playing outside. We would constantly, round up neighborhood friends and go play kickball or flag football or whatever it was, capture their flag. And so we were always outside and climbing trees and stuff like that. I was also a huge fan of Legos, which I liked both following the instructions and building the cool castles and everything, but I also liked the ability to crush that and then make whatever I wanted out of those pieces. And so that was, a really big part of my childhood. I actually still enjoy Legos. I think they're an amazing toy. And part of that also ties to the Chicago architecture and my interest in that. I did grow up in the Chicago area, and so my family would regularly go downtown for events or try a new restaurant or whatever it was. And then in high school, as I was able to adventure more on my own, my friends and I would hop on the train and go down and, I don't know, explore, just do whatever we wanted to do around the city. And there's obviously some very iconic architecture in Chicago. If you haven't been, I always recommend, it's called the Wendella Boat Tours, and it actually takes you down the Chicago River and has amazing architecture and historical facts about the city. So doing that growing up and being interested in Legos, those two kind of tied together. And I was always interested in building. And so as a young kid, I actually wanted to be an architect for a long time. And then I also have travel on there because I was very fortunate to grow up in a family that loved to travel, and that exposed me to other cities across the world, and got to see some cool, natural habitats and hiking locations and stuff. So I was very fortunate in that, and that also has led to a big part of my life and played a part in this path that I led to get to where I am today. I just want to share a couple pictures. This is the Sears, Willis Tower, now formerly the Sears Tower. It stands 110 stories tall, and it was the tallest building in the world from 1974 when it was constructed until 1997. And so, in the 90s, I was a little girl, and so it was fun and to know that fact. And at that time, to be able to say that I was from the city with the tallest building in the world was always really fun. It's still the third tallest building in the United States today. And on a clear day, you can kind of see on the top of the building, like right around here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but a little bit down, there's actually, you can go up to the top of the Sears Tower or Willis Tower, and they have these glass projections. So you can go out and stand on this glass ledge and look down, and from a clear day up there, you can actually see 4 neighboring states. So a very tall building, very iconic. It has a lot of history to it. And then one of my other favorite buildings in Chicago is this is called Merchandise Mart. It was originally the Marshall Field's, or now Macy's, wholesale warehouse. Was the original purpose of it. It no longer serves that purpose. It's kind of a mix of commercial building or commercial spaces. It's home to big companies like Motorola and some others like that. But this building is 93 years old and has 4 million square feet of space, which is just incredible. It's actually so large that it has its own zip code. So I think, learning some of these facts about architecture was always fascinating to me because there's always such a story to it. And I just really love that about the city, right? The city has a story. And so learning about that was always an interest of mine and why I liked architecture so much. And this is a couple pictures of me and my family traveling. In the top left, I'm in Italy. That was in early college. And again, kind of touching on the architecture elements, you can see the sort of additions to that bridge that are now businesses and residents, and just the way that cities evolve is truly always an interesting story. It doesn't matter where you go, like how that happened is going to be a cool story. Top right, we have my family trip in high school. We went to New York, and just the density and the way that pictures in Times Square. So, just the vibrancy of that location was really, it really struck me. It was just incredible. I mean, Chicago's a dense city, but, just this international location there was really, really quite cool to be a part of and to see and to walk around. And then the bottom center picture is me and my dad, just a little bit cold in Colorado. And that was a trip I took in high school as well when I was looking at universities and considering what I wanted to do. But again, playing into that outdoor interest and passion I have. So again, just a little bit about me and these themes that will kind of continue to arise throughout the story of how I got where I am. So I want to touch on high school me because you guys are high schoolers and probably in the same, at that point in life of thinking, again, what I was saying, what do I want to do? What do I want to study? What's important to me? And when I was in high school, as far as it relates to STEM, I was really big into biology. I thought it was really cool. I took an AP bio class. We got to, we were mating little flies and we were dissecting little mice and stuff, and looking at, biology on the cellular level, which I just thought was, so everything that is around us is built on this human scale, right? Everything's built in proportion to us. And then you're looking in this microscope and you see like the tiniest little thing, and it's living and moving and it's in us. And so to really explore that micro level of cellular activity was just like, whoa, this is so cool. I just thought it was fascinating. I still think it's really cool. I think it's interesting how, the cells of, you can look at a human cell and then a cell in a plant, and just see the structure. And that's kind of where the geometry, why I like that as well, because especially in nature, the shapes of leaves and how, why one leaf looks different than another. I just always was fascinated and continue to be just mesmerized by how our planet has evolved and how we have all these complex beings in this world. So from the micro side all the way to the sort of macro side on sociology and the study of societies, how they form, how they fall, how people behave in groups. That was also, a big interest to me because, we're all part of it. And so how in all these prior civilizations to today's civilizations, they are all related. And so that was another strong interest of mine. I included this picture of me playing soccer because, again, as I mentioned, outdoors and sports were a really big part of my life. In high school specifically, soccer was like a year-round sport for me. So I was very dedicated to it. And when I was thinking of, okay, well, I'm graduating high school, what do I want to do? I kind of had pretty much this list, exactly what you all are looking at. And so, trying to think, how do I want to merge my interest to study something in the future? Like, what does all add up to? And at the time, I thought that meant physical therapy. Like, oh, I could study physiology and be a physical therapist. That ties my interest in biology and people and sports together. I could do sports medicine or something like that. And so that's what I ended up going to school for. I went to the University of Colorado at Boulder, which is the image on the left. And it was an incredible place to really take advantage of the outdoor amenities it has to offer. From where I lived, I could walk up to those mountains in the background, just in between classes or whatever on a weekend. I did play soccer at the university for a club team there. And then I also really picked up biking. I didn't have a car, so I biked around as a kid, but this was really my first experience kind of using a bike to get around for day-to-day things. Which was different, but I loved it because there was a Boulder Creek path that there's a river in this image. You can't see it, but a beautifully paved path that goes through the whole town pretty much. And you can pop off and get to the library or whatever it was. And so that was a nice amenity to have, and definitely increased my interest and affinity for biking. A more prominent part of my college experience was my study abroad adventure. I went to South Africa for a semester, and it was really a turning point for me in realizing what my strongest interests and values were in. And so what I want to talk about that is that, a couple things came to light. The first one was transportation. These are called minibuses. It's kind of a hybrid between a taxi system and a bus system like you see here today, where in the valley where the buses are operating on a schedule. And it's a hybrid because these buses don't operate on a schedule. They more or less operate in the same area, so like between the mall and whatever neighborhood, but it's by like when the guy's car gets full is when he'll leave. And he'll drop, instead of bus stops, you essentially just like tell him, hey, I'm ready to get out, like stop, pull over, and he'll pull over. On corridors where there are a lot of the minibuses going by, they also have a sort of organic system that came together where they use like hand signals. So if you're raising a 1, I'm saying I want to go to the beach. And if I have my hand out kind of to the side, I'm saying I want to go to the mall. So there was this whole like language of transportation with this minibus system, which was really fun to both at first witness and then learn to be a part of. And so my friends and I, when we were there, we would take it to the beach, and we knew like the little symbols and everything, the little gestures that we needed to do. And this was obviously unlike anything that we have in the United States. So I became very fascinated with that, and kind of sparked my interest in transportation. I also, again, I always liked being outside, but studying abroad in South Africa was such a different and more intimate experience with nature. Seeing elephants, I took this picture that we're looking at, and I was on this boat, and they pretty much just walked by us, and they were chilling, and to just see them in their natural habitat, not at a zoo, and the ecosystems that is all playing around in these vast parks and open spaces was just, it's Lion King in real life. Like, how cool is that? And it's part of this world, it's real, and to see it in real life was just a truly amazing experience for me, and had an even deeper respect for nature after that experience. And then really the last thing that was a turning point and really critical part of my experience in South Africa was a class I took on water systems. This natural water cycle image should be very familiar to all of you. If you don't learn it in elementary school, you certainly learn it in middle school and high school. And this was the same sort of graphic that I learned about the water system as well. But when taking this course that I took, there's something very blatantly missing from this graphic, and that's the human element, right? Same image on the left, but I included this image on graphic on the right as well, because it gets into a little more detail of the elements that the water is playing into, right? We have agriculture, we have reservoirs, we have dams, and we make our own rivers and lakes, and we have wastewater, and we need water for industrial uses and commercial uses. And obviously, our homes are all connected to water systems. So learning about the true impact, human impact on water systems was a pivoting point for me, because it was, oh my gosh, I can help people with physical therapy, of course, but there's something bigger that I feel a calling to help with. And for me, it wasn't necessarily like going into water, right? I'm not in water, but there's other large scale industries happening around us that I had to explore. So after that, that was my experience at the University of Colorado. And again, I was graduating with physiology and sociology degree, and I had taken this water systems course that I was like, okay, that's something along that is more at my alley. So I took a year to think about that, because I didn't want to do physical therapy, and I was looking at environmental studies programs, trying to figure out, okay, well, what is, if I do a master's program in environmental studies, what's the career after that? I couldn't really figure it out. There was nothing that was really calling to me from there. But looking at environmental studies programs kind of led me to a sustainability program at ASU. And I was like, okay, well, kind of the same issue. This sounds amazing because it's more encompassing of my interests in nature, and there's some more technical problem solving and everything. And I still had the same issue of what do I do after that, right? What is my career with sustainability? You know, it's this new concept, and especially in the career realm, right? And what I found though, while I was looking at the sustainability program, was this urban and environmental planning program at Arizona State University. And I can actually, you can, and I did do the master's programs at the same time. It was a combined program. It took 3 years. And what I realized in looking at the urban environmental planning program is that it was really a combination of all my interests in people and cities, in the environment, and sort of, you know, sustainability planning, sustainability solutions. And so I just knew that it was for me, and I couldn't have been luckier to essentially have stumbled upon it through looking at environmental studies and sustainability programs. Everything underneath that orange line there are the different programs and organizations I was a part of while I was at Arizona State University. Pretty much if an opportunity or I was invited to be part of something, I said yes. I wanted to be involved in all of it. I wanted to know what was out there. I wanted to know what I liked, learn more about what I liked, figure out what I didn't like. And the way to do that is be involved, go see all the things. And obviously universities are a fantastic opportunity to do that because of all the resources and sub-organizations within a university. While I was at ASU, I had an internship with Valley Metro, and that kind of was the start of my interest, or not start because I have talked about how I was interested in transportation, but really spurred it because Tempe is, first of all, a great place to bike. They have a fantastic bike network. I was living there, biking all the time to class. I got this internship at Valley Metro, and I would bike from where I lived to the light rail station and then take the light rail to downtown Phoenix, where the Valley Metro offices are. As an intern, I had an opportunity to do a project with them. And, you know, well, I take the bike to the light rail. Now at Valley Metro, let me study how these interact. And in the realm of transportation, specifically public transit, all agencies across the United States refer to this connectivity of the first last mile issue. So light rail and bus can cover so much of the city, right? But it's not coming down my street. It's not coming down like a side street. It's coming down the main roadways. And so the first last mile connection is how people get from their homes or their office to that closest bus stop or light rail station. And that could be walking or biking, rollerblading, scooters, whatever it is. They have to get to the system to be able to use it. And bikes are always talked about as a huge component of that. We have, on the leftmost picture, you can see that we have space on the light rail to hold bikes. If you've ever used this, you know that it's not that easy to get the bike up there. It's first of all kind of in between the compartments, so it's a little difficult to even get your bike into that middle space, much less up on this ledge and then up onto the hook. So it's kind of a flawed design. And as a user, when I was on taking my bike onto the light rail, I started observing this and noticing the problems and noticing, do we know, having questions about, do we know how often bikes are on the light rail? How many bikes are on the light rail at any given time? And what I came to find out, for as important as the first last mile discussions are, is that the agency had very little data good data about the number of bikes on the vehicles, not only the light rail vehicles, but bus vehicles as well. And this is a problem because we again talk about this as an important connection, but we can't speak to it and how much we're accommodating bikes if we don't know, right? And second, if bikes are an issue, if there's too many bikes, right? At one time I took the light rail and there were 11 bikes on one car. And that can create, a difficulty for other passengers to get on and off, but B, a safety issue if there's lots of people, if there's an emergency and a lot of people have to get off. So, but you can't really adopt a policy if there's no data behind it. It makes it a lot more difficult. So anyway, there's a long-winded story, but what I looked at then was, okay, well, what sort of technologies are there for us to start counting bikes? For a number of reasons, I ended up having to do a video camera at one of the stations to test it. And you can see in the middle image, that's the camera view. And then on the right, in purple, was kind of all the space where people could walk. And then I should have made it a little bigger, I apologize, but there's kind of that like sort of rectangle with the green lines in it, the tan rectangle with the green lines. That's actually that's the camera view that you see. So I missed a lot of the actual station. I did collect some good data, but really the takeaway was there needs to be better means of collecting data, and there's a lot of ways to do it. But to this day, we're still don't have a good way. We haven't adopted or bought the technology to do that. So that was what got me even more interested into transportation, was my experience at Valley Metro, which then led me to HDR. And I was connected to HDR because Valley Metro hires consultants to help with different projects. And one of those consulting firms is HDR. So I started with HDR, and that's how I got to where I am today. And so now I'm going to talk about a couple of example stories or example projects that kind of explain what, how, and with whom I'm working. So transit planning overview, really what we do, well, we're sort of, transportation planners are sort of jack of all trades, master of none. We have to be familiar with a lot of different aspects of projects and how they get implemented. And this is both before, when it's an idea, and then we help carry it through until it's actually implemented, and sometimes even afterwards. A lot of what we do is with some data crunching. We use United States Census Bureau data to analyze, this is a big part, is analyze where population density is, where there are people who are households that don't have a vehicle, where there are people over 65. We really look at where transit could best serve the needs of people. And so again, this is a larger version of that map that you can, on the far most left map is a composite, combination of some of those criteria that I was talking about. No car, older people, anyone with households with individuals with disabilities, households below the poverty line. We combine all these key demographics that are indicative of someone who would take transit, and then we make it a density map. So that dark blue square here, in these smaller dark blue squares, are where most people live who are most likely to take transit. So a lot of what we do is we make these maps, and then we look at the transit system. So this middle map here is average daily ridership. We look at the existing system and how the routes are performing. And we do that both on the route level, as you can see here, and then on the far right map is the stop level. So this really tells us, okay, where are people getting on and off? How's the route doing? Are there segments of the route that are doing better than other parts? So should we extend service, maybe make it run to midnight instead of 10 o'clock? but only on this segment because that's where the people really are. Because there's a balance between, obviously, right, serving the people and then financial balance, right? We can't just operate the fastest service ever all the time because we have to pay for the system somehow. So looking at these maps, we come up with recommendations for where they should make service improvements, where they should run buses faster, or where they should extend a route if there's maybe a university or a medical facility that's not being served. So we come up with those recommendations. So these sort of plans are a big part of what I do. I also do a special sort of offshoot projects, and this is an example of one of them. This was for the light rail single tracking. The South Central Light Rail extension, which I assume most people have heard of, is a 5-mile extension that is going to make our current L-shaped system, L-shaped light rail line, into a T. So these black and white extensions, that'll go down 5 miles to Baseline Road. While this is under construction in this downtown area, to make this square here requires some very special track work and construction. That's not just like, oh, this will be done in a couple of days. It's like, no, it takes 2 weeks to do these locations, and then 2 more weeks to do other locations. And all during that time, the vehicles, we have to close one side of the tracks and have all the vehicles in both directions run on the same track. So they're alternating. One train will go east, and then once it's cleared, the other train will go west. And while we had the system and vehicles can have and do this, because of the extended length of time, they've done it, but it's only ever been in special situations, right? If there's an accident or a vehicle breaks down or whatever it is, we have this track work that allows them to do that, but in short periods. And so for these longer periods, construction periods, we had to take a look at the infrastructure, because now the trains are running 24/7 essentially in this operating pattern. And we have to look at, is this, how safe, this is a lot more frequent all day long. How are we going to make sure that this is safe? So I worked with engineers, and we did a review, which is this image you see here, of the infrastructure. And we looked at, okay, well, how, from the person driving, the operator driving the train, if they're going in the opposite direction that they should, can they see the signal? Can they see where to stop? Is the train stopping where it's now hanging into an intersection? So we did a full review of this downtown corridor to see what infrastructure needs were required. And this is new mast arm. A mast arm is what the signal lights are on. So we have to install a new one so that trains coming from the opposite direction where they normally do can actually see. So this was a unique little project that I did. A big project that I did that I worked on for the past year was this bus reroute plan. This is a better map of the South Central Light Rail extension. So you can see here again, goes all the way down to Baseline Road. In the top right, in this red circle, you can see Central Avenue. If you've ever been downtown where they do the ice skating rink in the winter, where they close the street and put the ice skating rink, that's the part of Central Avenue that's circled here. And that's actually now closed permanently to vehicles. So no, in the future, only the light rail will be able to go, and pedestrians will be able to use that part of Central Avenue. This was a problem where we had to do the reroute plan, because all of the commuter routes, which bring people in, they do 4 to 8 a.m. rush hour trips and 4 to 8 p.m. rush hour trips. So they're not running all day. All of those routes, it's almost 30 routes, use that corridor that's permanently closed now. So we had to look at how to operate those vehicles in a new spot. We also, on top of that, Central Station, which is a little bit north of this downtown hub spot, up here on Van Buren Street. This is what Central Station is going to look like in about 3 or 4 years. And it's a transit hub currently. So right up until October of last year, about 10 bus routes would go into this facility and be a point of transfer, right? You could get on from the bus to the light rail, vice versa. You could go bus to bus, whatever it was. It was a transfer or transit hub. It's now closed completely because this complex is going in, and it includes a hotel, some office space, condos, I believe, and then some retail space as well. And you can see in this rendering, they included the light rail. So the light rail on the east and west side of the property will remain open, but all the buses that were going into that facility got pushed out. So now we're dealing with, again, 30 or so bus routes that we have to reroute through downtown. If you've been downtown Phoenix, you know that there's a couple of main roadways, but then there's several skinny roadways, several skinny streets. There's one-way streets. There's streets that are one-way for part of it, and then they switch to two-way. So we did a whole extensive review. This took almost a year to develop. You can see on the left, we had all these different concepts that we had to explore. And I had to work with the city, the streets department. I had to work with the economic and development department. I had to work with engineers from the Valley Metro planning side to make sure bus turning movements could actually happen. We had to look, again, similar to the single tracking infrastructure. We had to evaluate, do we need a new stop sign? Do we want to change the stop sign to a signal so that it goes faster? Do we need to change a curb, push a curb back so that the buses can make that movement? So there was an extensive analysis that went into this. We also wanted to make sure that we were providing convenient change for riders, right? You don't want to, if you're used to being dropped off right outside your building, it might make you just want to drive instead if you now have to walk 6 blocks or whatever it is. So we tried to make it as convenient to passengers as possible as well. So that involved a whole ridership analysis, stop level analysis, that ultimately, when all was said and done, led to the map you see on the right. So that was really a fun and challenging project. And what made it most challenging was that it was also a moving target, right? Because the developer was saying, oh, we're not sure when we can when we can start construction and stuff. And on our end, working with marketing and communications and all the other planning that goes into it, right? We have a transit book that needs to be printed on time. And so we had to decide, well, we need to be able to create a clear message about what we're doing and when. We can't just do willy-nilly at the flex of the developer. So there was that element of this effort as well. And then, I apologize for the barking dog if you can hear that. A couple other things I just wanted to cover as far as what I do, aside from those examples I gave you. As Michael mentioned at the beginning, I am Envision certified, which Envision is like LEED, but for infrastructure projects. So if you ever LEED certified buildings and stuff, if you ever seen the little green leaf on the building or whatever it is, they got the up and down flushers and lights that turn on and off. Envision is like that, but for infrastructure projects. So if we tear something up, how can we use some of these materials again as we rebuild? Or how can we, make sure that where we're buying stuff from are more sustainable suppliers? And then a big part of it is public involvement too. How do we make a more robust engagement with citizens to ensure that we're investing in infrastructure that they'll actually use and value and is worth their taxpayer dollars. I do report writing, which is kind of like the first Glendale transit project I was describing. We do all the maps, but then of course we have to compile it into a written report that explains what we found. Grant applications is, I think they're cool. They're less fun to talk about, but that's actually how we get the money to do the projects. So there's a lot that goes into that with looking at the financial plan, which is how much it's going to cost to build it, as well as how much it's going to cost to operate it. We have to develop the operating plan. So how frequently is it going to run? We have to look at ridership. So I'm working with people who do forecasting, and we make sure, it is in a spot where it's going to be serving the highest number of potential riders. And then the GIS analysis, like I showed you, those maps, we pull census data, as well as there's employment data that we can pull. There's a bunch of different data sets that can be analyzed spatially that help with that. And then again, public involvement, I kind of spoke to that with the Envision Certified, but for some of these transit feasibility studies or transit studies, we ask the public for input as well. So while I'm at a public, there are people who specifically do this, like Michael Book and Bree Belke on this call. I sometimes attend the meetings. I sometimes help support the meetings by developing materials. So there's a different levels of my involvement with public involvement based on the project and project needs. So I guess some final thoughts as you think about your, finishing high school and your career path and your college path. My main takeaways are to definitely let your interests guide you, because you'll be happiest when you are doing something that you're interested. And be open to everything, because you might find interests that you didn't know you had. If you say yes and you try, you'll also learn what you don't like, which is equally as important. And so as you head to college and even in high school, join different clubs, take advantage of the resources that your school offers, because that's the best time to do it. That's where you don't necessarily have all those resources at your hand. Once you get into the real world, it's certainly a center and a great place to find localized information about everything. And then my last thing is that it's okay to change your mind. I graduated college with degrees. I used my sociology degree, but it was a strong pivot late in the game. And that's okay, because ultimately I'm doing something that I'm far more interested in, and I get up every day and I like what I'm working on, and I am excited to go to work and to be able to help people and make an impact on the environment and in people's lives through creating better transportation systems. So thank you for your time today. And with that, I'm gonna throw it back to Bree and see if there's any questions.
Actually, I'll go ahead and take it back right now. I just wanted to say thank you, Becky. Is very enlightening. And I know a big part of what you said was that you had done that internship at Valley Metro. And I think that opened your eyes towards other things as well. So, for anyone listening who is interested in just getting out there, that's a great way to do it. And that's where you came across HDR as an employer as well. And then I know Haley Estelle in the chat mentioned networking, which is also a big deal. So if you have any opportunities to do that, those are also other options. But yes, if you have at this time any questions, please either type them in the Q&A or the chat. And if you would like to ask a question directly to Becky, you can click at the bottom of the screen on participants and then click on the raise your hand option. Bree will then call your name and unmute you so you can ask your question. After your question has been asked and addressed, please click the raise your hand option again so your raised hand is removed. So at this time, go ahead and submit any questions that you have. Bree, are there any questions?
Yeah, so we have two questions that are pretty similar. So I'm going to try to wrap it into one here, which is what skills do you use most on the job? And then Danielle mentioned your certificate and has that helped your career? So I think those two things probably you can touch on together.
Yeah, so it really, I guess for skills, I have being able to communicate is huge because I'm working with a lot of different people. Again, I'm working with engineers, I'm working with public involvement, I'm working with finance people. So clear communication skills, which I know is not STEM, but it will get you through life. Being able to communicate and those interpersonal skills are essential. But I guess as far as when I'm, not directly communicating with other people, I am using GIS a lot and doing a lot of those mapping exercises, as well as a lot of different Excel data analysis. So those are kind of the two, I guess, more hard skills I'm using. And then the Envision certification, that is a really awesome program. It's as an Envision certified professional, I could be on a project and help guide the project so that it can apply for an Envision certification. So I say, okay, these are the criteria that they're evaluating you by. Let's make sure we're doing this, this, and this so that we can check those off and get those credits, right? I haven't been on that side of the coin yet. For now, it's really been review of other projects. So as an Envision certified professional, we help the organization review projects that are trying to get their Envision rating. And so, for example, I looked at Sky Harbor, the Sky Harbor extension, and you review, you get assigned a certain credit that you then review and make sure that they meet all the criteria. And so in that regard, in the projects that I've been a reviewer for, I'm really seeing some cutting edge stuff and some best practices for, again, public involvement and energy use through more efficient lighting and means of that, and things along that nature. So that's how Envision has sort of opened some doors in my career as well.
So another great question that has come up here is what other career paths can you do with an urban planning degree?
Oh, that is a good question. So I have a lot of my friends from my program. They're all over the place. You can do more community planning. So any truly community level on any sort of needs that they want. That might include a transportation element. That might include, applying for a grant for this, that, and the other. I have a lot of friends who went into sort of real estate or economic development. And so my one friend works for Greater Phoenix Economic Council, GPEC, and that looks at, attracting businesses to the Phoenix area. You can go into public involvement with an urban planning degree. So there's just a whole slew of careers that you can do, and you can do it on the public side. You can work for Valley Metro, or you could do it on the private side, or a city, or you can do it on private side, work for HDR, AECOM, any of the WSP, any of those private sector companies as well. They both offer those roles.
So we have another really fun question, and one that I always like hearing from our speakers. What do you like most about your job?
I like my job is never the same day to day. With planning and being a jack of all trades, master of none, I can get thrown into, anything from like developing a agreement between a city and an agency, and that's later in the game, or I could be at the very initial concept phase and doing the GIS and coming up with really creative concepts for bus routes or light rail, whatever it is. And sometimes I'm doing GIS and sometimes I'm writing reports. And so my day-to-day is never not just sitting in Excel every day. I'm doing different things and get to look at stuff at different levels. I get to look at, again, whole system, but I also get to look at, station level, stop level. What's our signage like? Are we clear enough to make sure people who get off the train see this and know to go here if there's a change or whatever it may be? So you're really thinking about all levels all the time. So that's definitely my favorite part, because it's critical thinking across the board.
And then the final question I have so far, and please, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, go ahead and place it in the chat or the question and answer section, and I will be happy to address it. The one that I have here is, what sort of classes did you take in college to get the degrees you have?
That's a good question. So I took some GIS classes. I had actually never taken GIS or done anything with that until my master's program. So that was really helpful. There's some planning theory classes that you take. So, why are cities currently the way they are, right? There's been planning as a field is relatively new. It used to be largely driven by architects and other engineers. So learning about the evolution of the industry and how planning has a distinct role different than architects is important. There was a class that I took. What else did I take? Some writing courses. There was a grant writing course, and then like a review course, so a plan review course. That's something that you can do as an urban planner, is related to development. Is if someone is trying to build something or wants something to rezone from a house to a single family house to a multifamily house, you have to review their plans and see how it fits into the urban fabric, the cohesiveness of the surrounding area. So that's another class that I took as well.
Very cool. Those are all the questions that I have so far, Michael and Becky. Thank you.
Thanks, Bree.
Perfect. Thank you, Bree. And thank you for joining us today for Becky's presentation. This session has been recorded and will be available on the WTS Metro Phoenix chapter website in the next day or so. I will send meeting participants the link to access. So I know, for instance, Arthur, I think Batalones identified yourself as a teacher, or there might be other teachers or students on. Please feel free to share the recording, set up a time that might be a little better for maybe your students to view this information, so the information gets out there. But in any case, the link will also be available on the Transportation U AZ Facebook and Instagram social media sites. If you ever have any questions, please let me know. But please forward the recorded virtual event link to anyone who you think might be interested, as I mentioned, and encourage them to join future events such as this, or see the other recorded sessions that are there. In addition to those sites, go to those sites for information for upcoming program events. So I hope you do consider attending the next Transportation UAZ April virtual event, which I mentioned. So it will be a special one geared to being environmentally sensitive. Our special Earth Day presentation will be Rebecca Eccles, who is the Utilities Conservation Program Coordinator for Boeing. And as I mentioned, it's scheduled on Earth Day, Thursday, April 22nd at noon Arizona time. Once again, I am Michael Book. If you have any program or event questions, please send me an email at michael.book@hdrinc.com. And once again, thank you to Becky Santiago for presenting, and thanks to everyone who joined us for this event. Have a pleasant day.